New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
And hello, here one, Rev Frisbee over here.
Rev Z right here.
And Rev Mark Gilbert here.
We like to surprise our guests and not tell them about that part, folks. So get everything started with an authentic, oh, what's going on here?
Where am I? Who am I?
Yeah. Exactly. And what's going on here is this is New Thought Today. It happens every Tuesday, 2 p.m. on the Mountain Time Zone. A chance for my brother Reverend LZ and I to get together and look at what's going on in New Thought today that's going to influence the future of this philosophy and movement so that we can all live the life we truly desire. Today, we are very happy to have with us a dear friend as well, Reverend Mark Gilbert. Reverend Mark lives in the Colorado area here, in the Denver area, and we've been colleagues for quite a while now. And you're going to hear as we go today that Reverend Mark's taking a more active role around the network. You're going to start seeing him and hearing more from him in various properties and in various places. But today, what we want to talk about is our creation story, or the creation story, or a creation story. Reverend Mark's a great blog writer and has a very well-rounded blog, Conscious Bridge, with many years of blog posts there, and author of a few different books that I know of that are on my shelf, and a long storied career within New Thought in a great way, served in many, many ways, and we're grateful to have you here today. Z, why don't you give everybody a little bit of background on how we got to getting Mark on the show today and what sparked our interest in speaking with him? Oh, looks like we've got you on mute, brother. Yeah, you're still on mute. And maybe you're...
There I am. I am no longer muted. Aha. I've known Mark for a number of years, and he's always been a deep thinker. We were in class together a while back, and we would always have some great conversations of looking at the different sides of things from different perspectives. We're both from the South, so we had that in common. And when you start looking at, what he had in his last blog about this creation, all cultures have a creation story. And so it becomes very interesting to look at the similarities and the dissimilarities. And so when we look at New Thought, where everything is started from consciousness, there is a great segue into creation story for sure.
Great, thanks. And I see that Robert's put it on the screen, at least for a moment there, that one blog. But the creation of that creation story really came about because of the New Thought Media program that you invited me to participate in. And that's the Saturday morning Science of Mind conversations that we're having around the Science of Mind book. And the first one that I did a couple of weeks ago was around the question, or the chapter in the book called In the Beginning, God. And I was reading through that chapter in preparation for the discussion we were having on Saturday morning, and thought, okay, Ernest Holmes sat down and wrote his creation story. What would happen if I wrote mine? And so I took some time to sit over a couple of days to actually refine what I felt like was a creation story. I didn't want to say it's the story for all of New Thought, but it was building off what Holmes had written in the Science of Mind textbook, and then putting my own perspective on it, looking at my own training, my own background, what I felt like was important to include, and things I actually excluded that Ernest included in his. But the key thing, and the reason I did it, was to encourage people to do their own, because I felt like the real learning comes whenever you're putting stuff in your own words. It's so much like in our Science of Mind classes, we have a lot of students write what they call thought papers, and we probably remember all writing those. And it's basically taking what you've learned and putting it in your own words. What did you get out of that? And so, in a sense, that was my thought paper, an extended one, where I was trying to capture what I really believe about the meaning of life and why we're here and our Creator and all of that. And I think it's an interesting process for us to go through and do that.
Absolutely. I love reading it. And folks, we've put a link in the chat box for you. All right, excuse me here. We're getting a little, let's see if we can make a couple adjustments here. There we go. We've put a link in the chat box for you if you'd like to read that. Now, don't click the link now. You'll go away somewhere and then you'll just hear us and not see us. We want you to enjoy this. But it's a great opportunity to take a look at the article, at the blog, and check out the back articles and other stuff. Mark, you've been very, in my opinion, very prolific. Over time, you have really created a great body of work to help what I often see as people coming in the door to New Thought to dig in and start to get their feet wet and really start to dive into this stuff.
I appreciate you saying that, Robert. I think that's one of the things that I've come to realize that's sort of my purpose in life. Is I felt like I've always had the ability to read stuff and sort of absorb it and transform it into something that was usable for me to understand the thing better. But a lot of people have given me feedback that it's helpful for them as well. So, a lot of my intent with the blogs is to try to take a lot of New Thought concepts and rephrase them or rework them or comment on other people's writings in a way that maybe makes it come alive for them, where maybe reading it flatly, didn't give them the real depth of what the person's intent was. So I appreciate you saying that.
Absolutely, yeah. And here again, you're challenging each of us to look at, well, how did I come to what I believe? And as we shared in a recent, do I still believe what I think I believe?
Yeah. Holmes wrote his in the Science of Mind textbook by actually building off the one in the Bible. And so what I was doing was taking the one of Holmes and building off of that. I would encourage folks, take the one in the Bible or the one in, of Holmes or my blog, whatever it is, as a beginning point, and then say, what do I truly believe about life? And what do I truly believe about why we exist and where we're going? I think one of the key concepts that Holmes, why he did his, was that in New Thought, we have a different idea of what God is relative to the mainstream faiths. I think when we were all being raised in the traditional Christianity, there was this concept of the old man in the sky God, and that it was an external being who judged us upon our death, that we prayed to, beseeched them to intervene in our lives, etc. And many people, said, this doesn't work for me, and they evolved beyond it in many ways. And most folks in New Thought resonated with New Thought because it offered them a vision of a God that wasn't necessarily a person, but it was a presence, an intelligence, something that's permeating everything that exists. And so you begin with the concept of, well, okay, we're living in this universe of oneness where everything moves and flows and has this, and gives rise to all the expressions of life that we have. And so at the very beginning, your creation story has to anchor into that differentness about what the Creator is. And then you go from there. Okay, why did they create this? One of the things I did put in my story was the fact that we don't know why. And I've actually, in some prior classes many years ago, I've sort of said, well, Spirit wanted to do this, or Spirit wanted, how the hell did I know what Spirit wanted? I sort of like conjectured. I came to a conclusion about what Spirit wanted, but I wanted to acknowledge in that story that we really, even if we anchor into this different idea of God, for us in our humanness to overlay some intention upon that Spirit and what their intent was in creating us, then I think there's a degree of hubris in that. And we need to move beyond it and acknowledge we may not know, but it looks like this. And here's what I believe about it. Okay.
Right.
So instead of putting intention on God or spirit, let's put the intention back on us that we've looked at it and this is what it looks like to me. And ultimately, I think that spirit did create this universe and embedded in it us, or the evolutionary potential for us to emerge so that we could have a relationship with God or spirit.
Yeah.
That we have the characteristics of the divine in us, and that those characteristics in us are what allow us to recognize the divine. And because of that, we're sort of moved into over a threshold in humanity where this self-awareness and the ability to know spirit sees ourselves as co-creators with God. So I wanted to build all of that in, as well as the evolutionary arc. There's so much in mystical teachings, the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, and the Great Chain of Being and things of that nature, that talk to the fact that the Creator embedded itself into its creation, allow the creation to forget where it came from, and that it's evolving backwards, back up. I like to use the Science of Mind teaching symbol with the V in it, which we normally mean. We usually use that to teach that the conscious awareness flows through the law for the manifestation of the physical. But I also like to say, that V also goes down and back up. And it also can stand for the involution, or God evolving itself into its creation, and the evolution of us moving back upwards into the flow, into our awareness of the divine. And so we're ultimately on a hero's journey, roaming around, forgetting where we're from, knocking around, making mistakes, but eventually evolving back into the oneness and knowing that God at a newer and higher level than we did before.
Well, and the interesting thing that you sparked in me there is, in the early beginnings of religion or spirituality, God was not anthropomorphized, i.e., he was not, or she was not pictured as a person. They were picked up as animals or forces of nature, because that kept it a little bit abstract, and it represented more principles or things that could be done, as opposed to locking it into a physical presence. And so at some point, those who anthropomorphize God or put him in a human form start shunning all those other forms for whatever reason. And I'll go with the hubris. That
power and control,
Yeah, exactly. And so you see now, as we begin to, I believe anyway, as we begin to look more at the creative source as a consciousness, as an energy, as a presence, it gives rise to look at how some of our ancient civilizations looked at the presence of the divine in various ways within our surroundings. And then that point about there was a class we took, and I forget which one it was, but we read the book by Arthur M. Young, The Reflexive Arc.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about that whole thing where spirit, the divine creative source, the thing itself, call it what we will so that we can embody it, but it speaks of the dropping certain degrees until manifestations, and then making the arc and going back up. And so I like to look at our purpose, if you will, here is to remember, as you said, God has, the source has put, if there was nothing but the source and it made us, then we're made of that. So we have some inkling of it. And I believe our purpose is to remember that. Yeah. And once we remember, we can make that art come back up, yep, and be back at a more pervasive, all-inclusive, conscious mind kind of expression.
Yeah, that's so true, LZ. I think some of the, Ernest Holmes said all of this, but I didn't catch it the first time when it was thrown at me in Science of Mind training. I had to roam around and find it elsewhere and say, oh, and light bulbs went off, and I came back and discovered Holmes had been saying the same thing the whole time, but it had either never been stressed in my Science of Mind classes, or I had, totally spaced it out, what he was saying. I wasn't ready for it on some level until I heard it from another way, and then came back and found Holmes had been saying the same thing, all along. And another thing that I worked into that creation story, and which was an influence on me from recently studying the Kabbalion, which I wrote a 4 or 5 part series on my website about. And in the Kabbalion, let me back up and just say I had wrestled with this question about what's really real. What's really real? Because some people like to say there's only mind is real, and some people like to say only matter is real. And we have this sort of like dichotomy between the two. And then everybody else says, well, if you try to believe in both of them, it's dualism. And then they sort of like, oh, like you poor little fool that you believe in dualism, because how do they interact, between, matter and consciousness, or the spirit and physical matter. And what the Kabbalion highlighted for me and taught me and made me understand Holmes a little even deeper was the fact that the absolute and the relative are not either or. There's not flipping a switch that you're either in the absolute or you're in the world of the relative. That it's actually a sliding scale, or a polarity is how the Kabbalion and the Hermetic teachings get to it, is that you're actually you can be moving from one end into the other. And you can imagine it's sort of like a big yardstick, where on the bottom end we're in the physical form and matter, and at the top we're completely into the form of the absolute, or God. But as a human being, we're moving on a sliding scale. And so part of our days, we may be down the scale into the world of matter and form, and complaining about politics and divisiveness, and my car breaking down, and whatever the thing that we're locked on. And then other days we can be floating up into the world of the absolute, and really recognizing the divine. And I think that we do that dance, and the humans move along that continuum, and everyone in our individual lives is sort of sliding, from moment to moment, and day to day. There was somebody asked Holmes a question about about something being real, and he says it's real as form. I go, what the heck is he talking about? It's real as form. But what he was trying to get at was that the world of form that's around us is real. This is all God, but it's not the ultimate truth. But while we are limited in our intelligence and awareness and consciousness of the world, it's real to us at our level of awareness. And so we have to interact with matter. We have to interact with the car breaking down and the divisiveness while we are in this area. But when we evolve to the higher level, it becomes less and less. And what the Kabbalion taught, and what Holmes teaches, is that the more we can uplift our consciousness to higher levels, yes, we still live day to day in this world of matter, and we still have to deal with getting the car fixed and all of that. But we can be above it. We can let it flow beneath us. We don't have to get our emotions and our mental state locked into what's going on down in the world of form. And so I was trying to, in that creation story, also embed a little bit of that flow between the absolute and the relative, and the fact that all of the relative is in the divine. It's just we're evolving back up along that sliding scale. Let's end with the little wild thing I went off on there for a few minutes.
Well, I appreciate that. And I like that, because we have to, that's what this program is about, right, folks? Taking a bigger, deeper dive into some of these things than maybe we've ever recognized before. Because if we don't, then we get stuck in one side or the other. And I've long held, you're never gonna be successful on the planet just sitting on a meditation cushion. We can't spend all day long just being in consciousness. And conversely, I can't spend just all day in my humanness. And I mean, you've probably tried it, folks, right? Burnout, stress, that's when the naughty words come out, all those things. And I found over time, I can judge how I'm doing based on how long it takes me to recover from the unexpected, no good, rotten, very bad type of days. Those human things that just smack you and go, oh, really? We're going to do this now. How long it really takes me to come back to that place of, okay, that's an experience. It doesn't have to define us. We can move beyond this. And it always leads me to, and I think where this conversation is headed, is what do we really want to create now? Once we learn this stuff, once we understand this stuff at even the basic level, it becomes obvious we have that ability, and therefore I would say calling, to create within this opportunity of a world that works.
Yeah, I think that we can look back on the history of humanity, and especially religion, and look at the fact that in the Eastern religions, there was a high reliance on the development of the skills of controlling consciousness that led to the monks who moved away from the physical world and became very adept at manipulating consciousness from a higher state, but did not work in the world of the relative form for creating the things that bettered humanity from a physical standpoint. Whereas on the Western world, it was the flip. There was a reliance on everything as matter, material, and material science developed great wonders that have raised the level and standard of living, but were devoid of meaning. And one of the problems we found in the Western world is that people, yes, they've got a high standard of living, but they start wondering, is that all there is? There's no meaning to life. And what we've seen over the last 50, 60, 70 years, maybe going back, I would say even to the exposition in Chicago in 1893 and moving forward, there's been a real shift in the U.S. where we've been melding the Eastern and Western religions and faiths to bringing together the best of both. And I think that's where we are now, that we look at the direction where spirituality and religion are headed, and they are immersed in the world of form for the betterment of our society, but also immersed in the world of consciousness to develop our spiritual growth. And another influence on my life is Ken Wilber and integral theory. And Ken wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Future of Religion. And his key points in that book were that any religion of the future, whatever it's going to be, and I really think New Thought has the seeds for this, to be honest, but that he said any religion of the future had to basically involve with us waking up, which is the spiritual aspect of touching the divine and knowing God in our inner consciousness, growing up, which is moving through the stages of development in the material world and in the world of consciousness to the higher states of recognizing who we are from a physical standpoint, of showing up, which is the aspect of being of service, to the world. And there's a fourth one that I'm forgetting. But the key point was we had to bring all four of these into whatever that faith is: waking up, growing up, showing up, and cleaning up. Cleaning up was the fourth one, and that's working on the shadow aspects of ourself so that we can clean up those things that have erroneous beliefs, we'd say in New Thought, but also those things that were embedded in us that have led us to having aspects of us that are less than the best of what we can express as human beings. Any religion has to work on all four of those areas for it to really speak to the modern human and where we're going on this planet.
And you made me think about something there, and especially in light of the Kabbalion. When you look at Egypt, ancient Egypt, there were 3 creation stories. There were probably more than that. I think there's at least 4 prominent ones, but there are 3. There's one from Memphis. There's one from Heliopolis, and then there's another one from Heliopolis. And so they all bring different aspects. One, there's the creation by the word, where Thoth and the whole Kabbalion comes from. Then there's the one with Ptah, who was it has been claimed the creator of the pyramids. His whole thing was about land coming from water and looking at the opposites and reconciling those with Isis and Osiris and that whole, and then you had Heliopolis, where it is this whole 9-godded Enoch that came about, or 8 gods. And so they look at the aspect from different perspectives. They look at the creation from energy, word. They look at it from the opposites that create the word or create the world, whether, and then this whole thing of how we blend together, which speaks to all of the things that we talk about, the shadow within us, if you will. There is a shadow or opposite, but in constant relationship in the universe itself. And the more we can get to that understanding, we begin to as they say, we begin to hold these things loosely and not so tightly that we get locked in. Because before the show, we were talking about there's a situation now in Phoenix where a Catholic priest for decades mispronounced or made a mistake in one word between I and we, and given the baptisms, and now they're saying, potentially there's a, couple, 2-3 decades of baptisms and other ceremonies that are no longer valid. And I question, well, where was his heart? What was the intent? Does the one word from I to we make that much difference?
Yeah, it's a sign of our personal evolution when we can take another's perspective, and the more perspectives that we can take, the wiser we're going to be. When you're talking about Egypt and each of the different creation stories, what I was hearing in that beautiful summary was that each one of the stories had a perspective on our creation.
Yes.
They had a limited viewpoint, but if you shifted, you could see it from over here. And it was only when you brought them together and you could move in your awareness around to all of the perspectives that something new emerged out of it, a greater perspective that was built on the combination of the previous ones.
Yeah.
But what you're then describing with the Catholic Church and the negation of all of these baptisms over one word is a limited perspective that says our way of reading and doing the baptism with this language, with this intent, is the only way to do it.
Yeah.
And they can't back up and say, but his intentions or the purpose that was intended in the consciousness of the priest could be considered versus just the actual words he spoke.
Yeah.
You know, and then they all of a sudden they've limited themselves. And what's going to happen would be that's indicative of not the religion of the future.
Yes.
You know, I'm not to say that Catholicism is going to end, but it certainly would have to evolve to a multi-perspective kind of viewpoint for it to have something new emerge out of it that would allow a higher level Catholicism to emerge that takes into account different perspectives and their congregants as well.
And you know, that point you make there, it brought to mind that one principle in the Kabbalion that talks about polarity.
Mm-hmm.
Basically saying that we're in this constantly thing that's moving, and the only difference is a matter of degrees. And so if we get stuck in a limited degree of perception, then we try to fit everything into that perception. And we know life to be a lot grander than what we see, what we hear. That's how we get into the whole quantum physics thing. Nobody ever seen a quantum, if you will. We see the results of the quantum. And so we begin to take different perspectives, but get a better understanding of the world and are able to operate in the world a whole lot better and a whole lot different.
Yeah, one of the beautiful things you just hit on is that the Kabbalion gets into the fact that we live in this universe of constant motion, you know, and we talk about the polarity, one end or the other. I was using it from the absolute to the relative, and we're using it again in what you were describing. But they also talk about the principle of rhythm, which is a moving back and forth like a pendulum swinging, and the principle of vibration, that everything is vibrating at different levels. And so what we're doing is interacting in the world, both in the world of spirit and in the world of matter, the absolute world and the relative world, is everything is moving in a polarity from one end to the other through a rhythm, and everything is vibrating at different speeds of levels. And there's also the law of correspondence, as above, so below, so that the higher end of the polarity, if you can shift up there, it's actually going to bring a shift about in the lower aspects of it as well. All of these are at play in this world of religion, and all of it's at play in what's going on with the example of the Catholic Church, but it's also going on in New Thought, that we are continuing to move on pendulums. I think if you've been in this philosophy very long, you see us, shifting in our languaging, shifting in how we present things. I think we got all point to a shift that we've all experienced in the last 10 years or so towards, by our deeds, they will know us, to we need to be out in the world making change and effectuating change. Mm-hmm. And it's a real pendulum shift in the consciousness of people who are studying New Thought.
Yeah. And as you said, I'm sorry, Robert, you just made me think about the capstone from the Kabbalion where it says it considers God to be the all in all, which is what you just described. As we go through all these different motions and rhythms and correspondence, the all is in all of it. And so you have to take it in that concept. And when you don't, you begin to lose your sight. Go ahead, Robert. I'm sorry.
Well, I was struck by when Mark said the evolution of Catholicism. And my mind went to, wait a minute, that's us. Or wasn't that supposed to be us? Right? We were supposed to be, maybe not just Catholicism, but let's take it a little broader and say Christianity. But New Thought was always in some way the intended or let's say heir apparent to Christianity from my reading, from my perspective. And I always saw homes. Now, I also did not have I did not have a religious background upbringing at all. Both you gentlemen know that, and most of you out there watching know that. So I came into this new thought thing from a different lens, from a different world, and but real quickly caught on to, oh, okay, he was just saying that so the Christians could feel at home, so people didn't feel too out of place when they found this philosophy and when they found this way of thinking. To me, it was real easy to say, okay, I just put all that Bible, God, Jesus stuff over there in that basket, and I don't have to use it or worry about it. Although I do still recognize there's that necessity to be that bridge. Have we not? Have we progressed in the last 100 years as a movement? Have we served as that bridge? And is it time to let go of some of that older languaging? I know, we're seeing a lot of rewriting and reconsidering, especially around gender language, especially around moving away from the patriarchal sound of a lot of things, being more inclusive of the language. Do we still need to be that bridge, or is it time for us to be our own thing, our own pillar, our own what's beyond the bridge?
I've heard a couple of questions in what you just said, Robert. I'm gonna take a stab at one of them, and that's the one about the evolution of New Thought in general. I think New Thought has always been sort of a two-pronged thing. It's been an ideology that has been presented to assist in the evolution of the consciousness of individual people, so that people could accept New Thought concepts. And back in the very beginning, many New Thought teachers did not form their own centers and communities because they felt like, take these teachings and bring them into your own faith. And so many people did that. Many people, and that has led to the evolution of other faiths, to the more progressive waves of mainstream Christianity. Even within, like you could take the Episcopal or Methodist churches, there's different people who believe different things along a continuum, and some are more progressive in their beliefs than others. And I think that New Thought and the growth of New Thought has led to that evolution and push that cutting edge of those faiths, so that every traditional mainstream religion has an evolutionary push forward in it that I think New Thought played a part in. But at some point, many people liked hanging around people who thought like they did, and so there was a push for many people to create their own communities. The Fillmores, started Unity. I think was one of the first, and then Divine Science, and Science of Mind actually came a little later than many of the other New Thought religions.
Yeah.
But it was an aspect of trying to bring us along. So if you're talking about New Thought as those groups, I think obviously they're evolving and changing as well within them, just as the traditional ones in there, because new scientific findings are coming about, new ways of looking at things, new ideas. That's why Holmes said that we should be open at the top, is because we want to be able to reflect upon the newness, and I think that includes language changes, like you're getting at too. So and that pendulum swing I mentioned about being more socially active, I think is a major swift shift we're seeing in New Thought as well.
Yeah, and I think asking towards another one of the questions, I think New Thought as we see it, religious science of mind, is an evolution, right? Because Unity started out only looking at a Christian perspective. By the time we got to Ernest was looking at Aurobindo, and he was looking at a lot of stuff out of the East. And he had tapped into some of the new the transcendentalist movements, which took a lot of their stuff from the East. And so, as we all know, at least here, Ernest didn't want to create a church. He wanted to create an educational institute, as Mark was saying, so that these universal principles, we find them in all the different religions, like in Egypt, where they had these different articulations of the story, which may seem different, but there's a tie-in. And I think Ernest was trying to create that platform for all these things to stand, to release some of that pressure. But as we know, stay open at the top, because as quantum physics comes around, some of this stuff is going to have to change. We're going to have to articulate it differently, but from a principle standpoint, it's always there. And one of my favorite is always, there's the principle of electricity. But when we get to the laws that can be extracted, you can get hydroelectric, thermoelectric, solar electric, fossil fuel electric, all coming out of that one principle. Neither one is right, neither one is wrong. They're situational based on where you are and what you have available.
I think that one of the things to realize is that we can honor all these paths. Yes. Some people want to stay in a traditional Christian faith and that yet be open to the growth of these new ideas. Others want to be in a new thought community that with like-minded people who think full-blown new thoughts, and so be it. And many people are really looking at it that they want to find their own faith and their own path outside the confines of any kind of traditional organized religion. And that's good too. And I think it gives rise to the, all of the new thought authors, even if they don't call themselves new thought, but you take Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, and many of these others who are bestsellers, it's essentially new thought. And many people are getting their faith and their understanding from life through the writings of people who are new thought in words, if not in labels.
Yes.
Therefore, folks, we're going to ask the question, is the writing on the walls or is the writing on your social media feed? We're going to answer that question in just a minute. Before we do that, we are going to take a quick break, let our guests grab a drink of water, let you do a quick stretch, and remind you of a few things that are going on around here on the New Thought Media Network and across the globe. Here's something you might want to check out. And we're back on New Thought today here on the New Thought Media Network. I'm Rev Briz, joined by my co-host Rev Z and our grand friend and guest Reverend Mark Gilbert. And before the break, gentlemen, I threw out that question, and that's just where my conversation's been leading me. are we evolving beyond the need for the physical location? And I understand there will always be those that want to hang on to the physical location. Uh, we can point to studies by Pew Research that have studied traditional religions. I think we can see it in our own congregations, regardless of the pandemic and its impact on what's the current experience. What do we see as the future of New Thought, and how does that impact the current model of Sunday morning, Wednesday afternoon classes, so on and so forth? Anybody want to dive into that?
I'll simply say it's not an either or. That yes, the multiplicity in which the Spirit expresses through people leads us to desire spirituality in multiple ways. Many people can get their spirituality through online programs. Many can get it through and desire a physical community. Many can get it through self-study. I think that the future is one that offers many paths and many tools and resources that allows a person to go in the way that best suits them.
Right. Yeah, and I think we've all heard the phrase, "You got to meet them where they are," and from that perspective, there's some people who need classroom and lectures, as Mark was saying, but there's some who need that experiential. We need to get out and be more social. We need to get out and be more hands-on, if you will. And so again, we have that pendulum swinging, and there is a place for everybody. There's a degree for everybody, and what we have to do as spiritual teachers and spiritual conduits, if you will, we have to begin to create an environment where people can get in where they fit in, if you will, and not feel slighted or less than or more than, but just understand that it takes all parts of the bike to make that thing ride. The chain is no more important than the wheels or the seat. It's all needed to make the vehicle go down the road.
And I'd encourage people who are listening to these words to think about their mixing and matching their own methodology. I mean, we have styles that we gravitate to. I love watching videos and reading books and analyzing stuff. But some of my greatest gleaning has been in those deep dive sessions where I've, pursued shadow aspects of my nature and held things up to the light and examined them, and and cried and moaned and grew through it. And I think there's value in crafting a spiritual opportunities that get at it from different angles. Again, back to that multi-perspective thing. If we only look at it from reading, then we're missing out on the wisdom that can come by experiencing it.
Yep.
Amen. Yes. Agree with you both. Thank you. It feels like it's a very interesting time, and you both get it. You're here on New Thought Media Network, and there is, even within this group, there is that pull to how do we balance out the both and the desire to want to be together, but also that sense of this is what fits for me. And we're able to create a more global, and I think a more interconnected, therefore expressing oneness. We're able to build a more global community through these avenues. I wanted to share this with you, Reverend Mark. Our dear friend Fiona, from speaking of global communities, from the Center for Spiritual Living in Geneva, Switzerland, is sharing that your posts have been very helpful over her times in a prac study, and that's what we want to encourage you to, folks. Right? Is exactly as Reverend Mark is saying. Find what fits for you. If I was never one to get myself what I used to think twisted up into a pretzel to meditate. Now I kind of like nothing more than to just be alone and let myself twist into a pretzel if I want. But that switches, that changes. And it's in this journey that we get to really explore who we want to be and how we and what it is we really desire in our lives.
Twist your language just a tad there, Robert. We want to find what resonates with us for our comfort, but then we also want to challenge ourselves and push ourselves into our outside of our comfort zone and taste spirituality in ways that maybe aren't the natural comfort area for us.
There you go.
As they say, every once in a while, we need to put a little salt and pepper on our food to kind of spice up the taste buds. So we say, "Ooh, I need to get a little something else here."
Now it's ghost pepper if we really want to get
Ghost pepper, yes. I have a jar of ghost pepper sauce upstairs.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that that's going to be key in the future is dialogue sessions. I mean, we had those sensitive dialogue sessions back in the day, the Dalai Lama and different luminaries from the various religions, and we still have the conference, of world religions. But I think it's going to take some, like we used to have the old book clubs, try to figure out how to get around that whole thing and begin not from a point of trying to prove my stuff over your stuff, but trying to find the connections and being able to say, let's move outside of these religious contexts. Let's look at humanity and where we are with this planet. How can we find this common ground that will bring us closer together so that we can see that it's all one? It's all connected.
It's interesting you bring that up. I was at the Toronto Parliament of World's Religions a few years ago, and I was part of the team that put together the New Thought booth there and staffed it and so forth. But one of the great learnings for me, we were represented by the Association for Global New Thought. I was there on behalf of Centers for Spiritual Living, but there were obviously, unity ministers that I was working side by side with and so forth. But what I discovered was, as I went to all these other sessions and talked to the other people from all the other different groups that were there, how much we all thought alike, that the ideas and concepts, the perennial philosophy, we might say, was embedded in all the ones. And there was sort of a self-selecting thing that went on. The people who chose to go to the Parliament were of those groups who felt an openness to their brethren and other spiritual faiths. What I noticed there was a lack of those people whose faith limited them from freely expressing in dialogue with folks who believed differently from them. So what does that mean for us in the as we move and evolve into the future? Is it there is a growing recognition that there are so many different tastes of philosophies and spirituality that have commonalities and are evolving in their awareness of their oneness. But there's others who haven't reached that yet. And this is not a judgment. This is a statement of fact that they're right where they need to be on their evolutionary path too. But they weren't there at the Parliament. And part of that was because it was beyond the ability to them to listen to somebody else's point of view. If your faith says that this is the only truth, then it's hard for you to be in dialogue with somebody who's got a different faith without you trying to judge them, negate them, or convert them.
Right, exactly. I'm reminded of the integral concept of transcend and include. That right. Even as we're being pulled forward, the people that haven't yet reached that understanding or that awareness, we don't leave them behind. It might be impossible to have a conversation with them, but we don't exclude them from the oneness at that point. We have to be inclusive of that, even if it goes against what we perceive as the highest and the best for everybody.
Yeah, this gets into a question, and I know that it's a challenge for many people in New Thought, is the fact that you're going to bump into people who we teach oneness and love and evolving into our role into awareness of oneness. And there's other people who are teaching our way is the only way, and you're going to hell by their view of what hell is, etc.
Right.
And we have to hold in our truth and lightly love them and allow them to be where they are in their beliefs, and not be judgmental of them. And this is in so much of our life. It's like we have to hold a healthy boundary of people who want to negate what we believe and who we are, while also allowing them to be who they are and what they believe. Right. And there's a dynamic tension that goes on in us in our hearts and minds. And I think that New Thought is called in each of us in our personal evolution is to be open to loving acceptance of those whose beliefs are different from us, while still holding healthy boundaries of any actions or beliefs that might be directed at me that would be limiting me or harming me in any way.
Yeah, I think one space that we hold and can continue to hold is how do we reconcile the opposites? The opposites will always be there because that's how the universe is made. But if we are not able to be in a place to reconcile them, to see that they're one and the same thing, just from different aspects, then we continue to spin and blame and all these other things, while the totality of it all begins to slip away from us.
Yeah, it gets back to what Robert was talking about a moment ago about transcend and include, and
Yeah.
Wilbur had another aspect of it in terms of our evolving upwards, that we have the ability to, at the same time that we can love and honor somebody, we have to recognize that everybody is born at square one, and what that means ultimately is that we want to say that we're all coming to this state of higher awareness and oneness, and we're all going to sing Kumbaya and dance off into the spiritual sunset. But every new spirit born onto the planet is born at square one, and they've got to evolve through the stages themselves. And what you're going to end up with is that although we may have a growing number of people who are at the higher levels of spiritual awareness, there's always going to be a body of people who are born onto the planet and are moving through these earlier stages and getting into what they call a center of gravity, where they get anchored into a level where this is what they believe. And we just have to say, okay, instead of all of us getting to that end state and thinking we're all going to complete, we have to be aware there's always going to be this subset of people who are growing and evolving and believing differently. There's always going to be groups of people who are choosing less than paths, because that's a part of the evolutionary story and part of the growth story of spirit.
Yeah. And you again, you just hit me back to the Kabbalion in terms of people will come in here vibrating at different levels, which will mean their pendulum will swing different, and their degree of operation will be bound by that frequency and vibration. And so if it can be raised, it'll raise. If it can't, for whatever reason, it'll stay in that trajectory. And it is what it is. And so, but we know everything is included. There's only a matter of degrees between any differences.
Well,
and see, we're going to come back to the best story you've ever heard, folks. Z and I and our creation story, because what we've been sharing is exactly that. When the first time Z and I met, it would have been real easy for me to slip into a place of judgment, a place of spiritual superiority, and to say, I don't know who this guy is, but he ain't really New Thought, and he's kind of crazy. And the whole trajectory of our time together would have changed. We wouldn't be here today. But what it took, and what I want to reiterate, is all it took was dialogue.
Yeah.
Because what he said it wasn't a trigger as in like, oh shit. It was more like a trigger as in like, what in the hell is this? And we were in a situation, and we were in a place where we could have that dialogue.
Yeah.
So instead of, oh, my judgment of him, it became, oh, tell me more about that. Well, I don't get that. Help me understand that. And it's in the dialogue that we really come to know our oneness.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, and that's what it takes. I think it was Mark Twain said, they some to the effect that they said 32 degrees was freezing. He said if that thermometer had been 1 inch longer, man, we'd all be dead. Because it's just a matter of degrees between 30, what's freezing and what's not freezing, And so the similarities and the differences are only in appearance.
Yes.
Twain also said that global travel is good for the elimination of our prejudices, or words to that effect.
Yes.
And so that, I want to, Fiona over in Switzerland, it was a commercial you ran during the break for the retreat they're holding there, and I was blessed to be able to lead that retreat several years ago. So I'd encourage folks who have the opportunity to travel to Switzerland. It's a beautiful setting there, and with David Alt coming and whatever their musical guest is going to be, that's going to be quite the treat. And I know it's a wonderful, loving community. Beth Linguri was helped get the group going, and they're just a blessing and a joy over there. So, and I think all of us should travel.
And I'll be there.
You will? Oh, okay, cool.
Yes, I will be there as well.
I think it's been wonderful to travel around. I've been blessed to go to New Thought communities in many countries, and it's interesting to see how this philosophy is blossoming around the world. But it has an aspect to it that's truly American in the flavor of the sense that we were instilled with the sense of self, finding our own way, independence. And there's an interest. And I been listening to the words of Mitch Horowitz. Just me put a plug out there for Mitch and his work. And he's one of the speakers that talks for the Philosophical Research Society out in LA. Go to their YouTube channel, folks, and a plug for a competitor for you. But he's got some great talks out there. And part of that is the American spirit and how we are driven by the independence and the desire to seek spirituality on our own, which is not necessarily the natural in a lot of countries around the world. But I think countries are coming to that. And I think countries, as people in Switzerland and other places are evolving in their awareness, they find that, the old ways aren't working for them either. And they want to find their new path to spirituality and to God.
Mm-hmm.
Big shout out to the global community that's emerging around the globe. There it is, around the globe, Kenya and throughout Africa and across Europe. And we know you've done a lot of work in that regard and in that arena as well, Mark. We do not have time to explore all of that today, however, so we're going to have you back if you'd be willing.
Oh, sure, anytime.
Let you folks know, Mark is part of our Science of Mind and Spirit Saturday morning conversation team. This week, it's actually Reverend L. Zia speaking on the chapter of the book titled Spirit. Mark will be with us again on the April 2nd, Saturday, April 2nd. He'll be with us, and that talk is on the power of thought. So please keep joining us on that program as well. We're going to say a quick thank you before we leave to all of the people that make this network happen. If you're part of our committed giving program, get ready. Now's your time to shine.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Heckerland Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Odgen, thank you for your very generous donation. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.
And a big, huge thank you to all of our committed donors. If you'd like to become part of the sustaining membership that keeps this network on the air and keeps all of this great program going and expanding, please do consider joining us on a monthly donation over on New Thought Media or ntmedia.org. All right, gentlemen, we'll get started with Mark before we head out. Final thoughts for the week.
Just thank you for inviting me today, and it's been quite a blessing. And also check out my website, Conscious Bridge, where I posted a new one today.
We did
Final Talks.
Ooh, we did just post a link in the chat box for Reverend Mark's blog as well. So check that out. That link should be right there in your comments. Rev Z.
Yeah, I would say I'll follow Mark's idea of the breadth of information. Look at different New Thought perspective. Look at different New Thought audience and organizations, and you'll begin to see the oneness of it all. I know that kind of sounds cliche-ish, but when we can get beyond the personalities and all of that, the information is one.
Yes. And mine is simple, folks. Please check out New Thought Media Network and keep on coming back. Share with your friends. Next week on this program, Reverend Dr. Temple Hayes will be with us. So please plan on joining us again. Upcoming in a couple weeks, Gabriella Claiborne in late March as well. So join us for that. I'm Rev Briz. Until next time, we're all out of here. We love you. We'll see you again real soon. Until then, peace.